Welcome to Session Sunday. Hi guys, it's Jack Edwards and today's session is going to be focused around a small group session. But before we get into this week's video, make sure to give us a like and subscribe, and if you missed last week's video, click on the link above. Okay, so moving into part one of this week's session, we're going to be starting off with an SAQ based drill. We've got 5 players this week, but you can adapt it for 4 players or even less. In terms of the setup for this part of the session, we're going to be going 8 yards from the start to the middle, and then another 8 yards from the start to the end, and then 5 yards across. In terms of equipment, it's just cones to start off with, but we'll be using balls later on. And then if you have hurdles and poles as well, that'd be good. If you don't have hurdles for later on, you can just use cones again, but emphasise on the players about getting the legs quite high as if they're jumping over hurdles. So the first part of the session is going to be split into 2 parts as well. The players are going to be working on sprinting out and backpedaling. Okay, so the first player will start here. They're going to sprint up to the first middle cone, then they're going to go backwards all the way to the opposite side, and then they're going to sprint forwards again before returning backpedaling to go to the back of the queue, which means the players move up 1 space at a time. Okay, and the person who's just come in will go to the back, and then the next player will come in, go forward, backwards, forward again and backwards before the next player goes in. How we adapt it is they'll do the same thing again with the first 4. So it's going to be forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards. When they get to here, that's then the trigger for the next player to go, because the player who started here is going to be sprinting up to the next square. So they're just going to sprint right up again. Okay, then they're going to go backwards, forwards, backwards, and then through across the line, and then it's going to be simply a walk all the way back, and then by the time they get back here, most players will have already started, so they'll go again. So you want the players to try and do 3 repetitions without the ball, and then do 3 repetitions with the ball. So we're focusing on the dribbling in here, okay, turning, dribbling again, turning back, and then doing the same on the way through. So it's focusing on that sprinting out, backpedaling to then get round the cone and sprint again. So using that acceleration round the cone to get through. We will now move into our first animation before moving on to part 2 of this week's session. So moving into part 2 of this week's session, we're now going to be looking at an SAQ based drill again, and then moving into ball work. So when you split your players up now with the 5, try and split them up 3 one side and 2 the other side, just so they're not waiting too long in between the repetitions. Again, you just need cones, but if you do have poles, try and put poles in instead, so the players have got to try and shimmy around the poles, so they've got to get that low body position. So they're going to be shuffling across. You're going to have 5 cones in the middle here. You can set them a minimum of 5 yards apart, okay? Shouldn't be any shorter than that, and it shouldn't be any more than around 7 or 8, because the players are going to be working hard and they're going to feel it in the quads as well when they're shuffling. So we're working on shuffling out and then shuffling across through every single cone, okay? And then once they get through here, they'll join the back of the next queue, and the next person will go. So it's just working on that shuffling, okay? So making sure they're not clicking the heels, slowing down around the corners, and then shuffling across again, okay? So as if they're jockeying players and they're coming inside and outside of the pitch. And then we're going to do the same with the ball again. So when they get the ball, it's going to be dribbling around. So when you dribble around the corner, if they lead with the left foot, when they dribble around, we want them to dribble out with the right foot, and then they can lead with the right, dribble out, and then do it with the left. So they're using both feet, and they're getting more acceleration around the corner because they're taking less touches. And the same again, once they get to the end, the next player will then go. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to part 3 of this week's session. Now moving into part 3 of this week's session, we're now moving into our final SAQ based drill for this week. So now we're going to have a shape which is a bit like a H, okay? So we're going to have 12 yards apart from the start cone to the deepest cone, and then we're going to go in the middle here 6 yards, so bring it in 2 yards in from the side, and then we're going to go 4 yards across and then backwards again, so it's 6 yards in between each one. So we're going with 6 yards of width in total, 8 yards of width in total, and then 12 yards of depth. So the players are going to do different movements now, so sprinting, backpedaling and shuffling, okay, so it's if they're transitioning from defence to attack, and then the opposite way as well. So the player's going to sprint out to the first cone. It's important that they make sure that they get round it, okay, so they're focusing on that footwork around the cone, and then they're going to backpedal towards the middle cone here and get round it, and then it's going to be a shuffle across to the other cone in the middle, and then it's going to be a backpedal again, okay, towards the back cone, and then one last sprint up. Okay, as soon as the player has got into the first middle cone, then the next player can go, so there's not too much waiting time. And then once they've got to the end, it's going to be a little walk back, okay, get themselves back in, and then they should be ready to go again to do 2 more reps. Then when they do it with the ball, we're going to be focusing again on that turning, so sprinting up, so good acceleration, slowing themselves down. So if they're bringing the ball in with the left foot, getting themselves round and leading with the right, so then get around again. Okay, so we want to get round the outside of the cone each time, round the outside, and then one last sprint through again. So you need to have as many balls as you can for the players to use. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to this week's 4 corner model. Looking at this week's 4 corner model, starting off with technical and tactical. Looking at the SAQ based drills, what we've been doing so far. So focusing on our heels off the ground. So when we're shuffling backwards, when we're getting around the corners, it's important to be nice and light on our feet so that we can burst around and get into acceleration. And then working on our fast feet. Okay, so moving as quickly as we can to get up to the next cone. And then finally pumping our arms, especially when we're moving backwards and sideways, so we can gain as much speed as possible and our technique is good. And then looking at scanning our surroundings, both for the SAQ based drills and now moving into the technical drills. So in terms of the SAQ based drills, it's scanning our surroundings so we know that we're going, especially on the shuffling and the back pedal, because the cones are going to be behind us, we need to see exactly where we're going. And then focusing, scanning our surroundings in our technical based drills, we're scanning the area around us so we're aware of where the space is, where we're going to be receiving the ball from and where we're playing it to. And then our movement to receive the ball. So when we move into our technical drills, we're going to be trying to move around cones to receive it, opening out and playing out. So looking at our receiving skills, so we're always focusing on our body position to open out and play quickly to somebody else who's in a different angle. So making sure our body position is, we can see where the ball's coming from and where we're going to play it to. And then finally, our execution of our passes. So when the ball's coming in, so us using the speed that's on the ball to maybe play first time, or if the ball's coming in slow, taking a touch away from the body quickly to then drive on and play the ball. Looking at the psychological corner, the main focus this week is awareness. Okay, so awareness of the space around us. So it's important that when we move into our social corner with the communication, players are telling people where to go, but being aware of where the space is. So when we're working in a group where there's 2 players working at once, it's important that we're looking at the areas where there's space around us so we can focus on our body positions then where we're going to go into space and then turn out and play the ball. Focus for when we're working for 1 minute and then 30 seconds. Okay, it's tough work, so it's making sure that we're focusing on the right things. So our footwork, and then getting through, focusing on our control as well, and keeping that for the whole time throughout. And then finally, again, like we've mentioned in the previous 2 videos, enforcing a positive attitude on the players. Okay, so they're working hard for that minute. So making sure that instead of just doing it at a nice steady pace, they're doing it for the hardest that they can throughout. Now looking into the physical corner, so mentioning speed again, both with and without the ball. So we're tailoring in our fast feet, keeping our heels off the ground. Okay, so the more we do that, the quicker then we can go. Our acceleration, so accelerating around the corners, but when we're coming up to the corners, de-accelerating as well. Okay, because we're going in too fast to the corners and then going into a back pedal. Okay, there's more chance of us falling and losing control of our body position. And then endurance, so again, tailoring into that focus side of the psychological corner. So we're working on our endurance, okay, for the minute, for the 30 seconds, putting it in, working to our maximum, because the more we put in, the more we get out. So that's a good thing to rely on to the players. The harder they work, the more rewards that they'll get. And then finally, our ABCs, okay, so our agility, balance, coordination. So we're going to be going through ladders, going through hurdles, okay? So it's important that we've got that fast feet, those heels off the ground, pumping our arms, so that we're able to turn quickly, we keep our balance, and then we're able to power out. And then finally, moving into the social corner, our communication. So players who are going to be receiving the ball, it's asking for the ball. So you're telling players to hold the ball until you get it into the space where you want it, and then asking for it. And then the players who've already got the ball and can see where the space is informing the players where to receive it. And maybe they haven't seen the player who's got the ball, it's telling them to turn out. Let's say you can shout a player's name, turn out, and then you can then give them the ball. So when the players are tired, they're going to need that bit of communication so that they know where they're going to receive the ball from. And then again, our praise and support, so relaying onto the players, that positive reinforcement, giving them lots of feedback, okay, to keep them going, because after 30, 40 seconds, when they're receiving that ball, they're working hard, they just need that bit of extra praise to get them through to the final 20 seconds or so. Now moving into part 4 of this week's session, we're now mixing our SAQ-based drills with now some technical drills. So we're working on our ball control here and our passing. So the players are going to get split into 3 groups, so it means the coach has to get involved. If you've got 5 players, if you've got 4, then it's just going to be 2 groups of 2. So this is where you're going to need hurdles and poles. If you don't have poles, it's fine, you can use cones, but it's good to have the poles so they take it across it when they're receiving the ball. And then with the hurdles, if you don't have the hurdles, if you've got some maybe bigger cones, you can use them. If not, just emphasise on the players about getting that jump over the cone. So what the players are going to do, they're going to work for a minute each, and then they're going to work for 30 seconds each. So they're going to start in the hurdles, they're going to have 2 feet together, okay, they're going to jump to one side, jump back to the middle, jump back to the other side, jump back to the middle, and then they're going to come into here. Okay, so in terms of the difference here, it's going to be 5 yards from the hurdles into the middle here, and then you can decide however far you want the pass to be. I'd say 10 yards for a good pass so they can get some nice firm speed on the ball. Then they're going to receive inside the pole or the cone to then take it on the outside. So we're focusing on that touch to take it across the body to then pass the ball. So they receive it one side, so it could be left foot receive here, and then play, and then the player is instantly going to go to the other side where they receive the ball again, play on the outside, and then go back in for another one. So they want to be getting at least 5 to 6 repetitions in a minute, so they're working as fast as they can, okay, to get as many reps done. When they're in here, it's important, okay, that they do keep the heels off the ground. So with the players jumping with 2 feet together, it's important to use that spring, okay, when they're landing on the feet, okay, on the tips of the toes to spring back up, especially when they're tired, because if they're landing with the feet flat on the floor, it's harder to get back up because the hurdle should be quite high as well. So it's important to use that spring to do it as quick as they can to then get in and then focus on that first touch across the body to play back. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to part 5 of this week's session. Okay, now moving into part 5 of this week's session, we're now moving into a receiving skills based drill. So we're going to have 1 player in the middle and we're going to have 4 players on the outside. So the players will do a minute each and then 30 seconds as well. There's going to be 2 balls on the outside, so you might have 1 here and 1 there. So what the player's got to do is, after they've received the ball and played out, they have to get round the pole or a cone if you don't have any, okay, before receiving again. So it's a 5x5 box in the middle, and then you're going to do 5 yards on the outside minimum for each cone on here, but you can go a little bit further back if you want the passes getting fizzed in a little bit more. Just depends on what age group you're working with. So the player will receive the ball, they'll open out to someone, play the ball in, okay, then get round the pole, and then they might receive it again from the other player who's got the ball. So it's important for the players on the outside to talk. So if they haven't got a ball, they can obviously receive it, and let's say the player's body position is here and you can see 2 or 3 players, but that player's got a ball and they've just received it off this player. It's important for this player then to say turn out, and then it's 1 touch to turn out and play through. And it's important once they've played the ball, try and get round different poles, okay? So then have a look at where you're going to receive it. So then if we play into here and then this player's got the ball, it's important to get round one of these two poles. So when they're coming back in, they're coming onto the ball and they're not having to move away from it, okay? So they can move onto the ball to take the touch out and then pass again, okay? So you want them working at a good intensity for a minute, and as that minute goes on, okay, they're going to need that communication from the players and lots of support from the coach as well. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to the final part of this week's session. Moving into the final part of this week's session, we're now moving into a passing sequence. Okay, so we're going to have 4 different poles set up, but again, if you don't have poles, you can just use cones. Okay, so from the start point here into the first pole, it's going to be 10 yards, and then it's going to be 15 yards from this pole to the next one, and then it's going to be a 15-yard gap again from this pole into this one. You can increase the size if you want to, but by the end of the session, the players are tired, so we don't want them running as much, and the intensity can be a little bit higher in a good tempo. So we're going to be working, first off here, the ball's going to start, and then we're going to play into the middle, and we're going to be working on 1-2s. So we're going to start this side of the pole so that we can get some movement. So the player is going to play into the player in the middle, who's going to receive here, and play it back this side of the pole. So then this player here can play instantly first time into the player wide. So then we're looking for movement across the pole from the player in the middle. So then this player can take their place. It's going to be a 1-2. So we want the players on the outside to receive behind the pole to give themselves as much space to play the 1-2. So it's going to be played in. They're going to get themselves around and it's going to be played back. So then this player will follow up here. And then similar from this player here, they're going to create as much space as they can to play their 1-2. So they can curve their run to then receive on the run and play in to the next player. Okay, so the players are basically just moving up one at a time. Okay, so let them get used to it first, maybe play nice and slow. And then once they're used to it, we want to increase that tempo and make it as much one touch as we can and focus on their movements. Because if the movements aren't good, then we see sloppy passes. Okay, and we see touches getting taken when they don't need to be, and there's not as much space for the players to work in. Okay, so it's important that they do get that movement so they can create space to play better passes in, okay, and get passes on the run, which is more realistic to a game. We will now move into our final animation before concluding this week's session. Thanks for watching this week's video. For more content, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook and TikTok. The links will be in the description below, and we'll see you next week for another Session Sunday.